Alexander Platt is the conductor of the La Crosse Symphony Orchestra. We got to talk with him about the importance of the symphony, his love for the Driftless region, and what's next for his craft. From producing live webcasts including the Detroit Symphony Orchestra to the longevity of the Maverick Festival in New York, and what's on the horizon for the La Crosse Symphony Orchestra. I'm Amy, and he's Brent, and this is La Crosse Local.
I was born actually in New York City, and I grew up in Connecticut. People kind of jump to conclusions when you say to people in the Midwest that you're from Connecticut, but actually kind of upstate Connecticut is a very kind of quasi-rural atmosphere that's actually, if you squint, you could be in a lot of Wisconsin and the Driftless region. It's really not that different. The 1970s and 80s, in which kind of the arts were everywhere in our schools, the arts were a treasured part of our children's education, and it was never something that was called into question. It was just something that everybody did. So I kind of grew up on this kind of feast of music, and I worked very hard as an instrumentalist. I was a violinist, and then I was very active in my church choir, and I kind of rose through the ranks of that system and eventually got to Cambridge University in England, where I got a scholarship for several years. Music, whether it was playing in orchestras and then realizing I very much wanted to be a conductor, or playing in chamber music with other musicians, singing in cathedral choir, and then all of this just kind of came together. And I just realized by the time I got to college, I realized that I had to make music my life. It had become something like an addiction in the best sense of that word.
You were kind of born into it, just looking at your credentials, your experience, and just dedication to this genre of music.
I was not born into a musical family at all. I was just born into a very special atmosphere and a very special time. And one of the things I really love about making my career and most of my life in this upper Midwest, this Driftless region, is that we have a wonderful kind of balance of progressivism and traditionalism. We're always forward-looking, but we love our old world traditions. So it's like a perfect place for me to be a conductor, which is why I just feel so lucky to be in La Crosse. It's been 10 years already, and it's like gone like in the blink of an eye. It's just like a great marriage. I just feel so completely comfortable there, not only with the city itself, but the whole region. I just feel completely at home.
Why do you find this type of music so important to maybe yourself and also the community?
Well, that's where your question is well-founded. I mean, like, you are kind of born into it in the sense that you just discover in your childhood that you love this kind of music that we never quite find the right term for. Traditionally we call it classical music, though that kind of has this kind of slightly elitist undertone, or some people call it serious music, but that implies that other forms of music are not serious, or art music. I don't know what to call it. I mean, I'll just go back to the term classical music because it's kind of, I guess, better than any other. But there's something about this classical music tradition. It's like a mighty river into which 1,000 tributaries flow, defining our greatest aspirations as human beings. On the one hand, it defines our greatest aspirations of kind of love and hope and glory and valor and compassion and heroism and all those great noble human virtues. So we love it on that level, which is this magnificent level, but at the same time, it has a way of reaching each of us individually and allowing us just the act of coming together with other people and not just listening, but experiencing a great piece of music in live performance has a way helping us just make sense of our own lives, whether it's in La Crosse or it's out here in the East. I have people who come up to me after performances and say, gosh, I had such a tough day today. What is unique about classical music, the way it has these emotions on a grand scale, and yet it communicates to each of us very intimately. That's kind of a mystery that I think will always be there.
You know, it's kind of been exacerbated by COVID-19 happening. I mean, I've spent more time online watching lots of live entertainment. It's actually kind of exposing me more to things I wouldn't necessarily watch or attend I know you've had some experience in hosting live webcasts, including the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. I know it's really tough now, but do you see this virus affecting the La Crosse Symphony Orchestra in potentially a positive manner in any capacity? I mean, it is a big change.
Right. Yeah, the answer to that would be like yes and no, or like more accurately, no and yes. In the immediate sense, let's be honest, it's terrible. And like I can speak to you as someone who embraces the great river culture of our Midwest. The beautiful thing about being in this kind of Mississippi Valley and is that see it every day in La Crosse. There's this wonderful balance that people have. And that I was talking about the great balance of the upper Midwest and this kind of traditionalism and progressivism at once. And like what's so great about our region is that you can get out in the beautiful outdoors. You know, you can do that every day of your life, but you can also go hear your local orchestra or go to your local theater or your great restaurants and art galleries and museums. And you can have it all. That's what's so treasurable about this region. You can really have it all. In the immediate sense, I mean, let's just face it, it's terrible. There's just nothing that can replace live performance. And in La Crosse, at the La Crosse Symphony, we have this beautiful orchestra, but we have this beautiful audience. I mean, I've never quite had this before in my career where the audience literally does participate in the performance. At the La Crosse Symphony, you can just feel the love that the audience is sending you over the footlights. So I miss that terribly. I miss that desperately. As you kind of implied with your question, this is all forcing us to learn new tricks and to communicate and interact with people in ways that we didn't before know about. And I had an inkling of this because, as you were saying, for several years, I've had a lovely time occasionally driving to the east from Chicago out to Detroit and hosting their live webcasts. And the Detroit Symphony kind of had this near-death experience because of the economic crisis that was in Detroit years ago. But the Detroit Symphony has made itself an integral part of that city's renewal because in part of their embracing of the new technology. And the positive thing about COVID-19 is that it is literally forcing us all to learn those new technologies in order to reach out to and interact with our audiences. It's just doing it, shall we say, ahead of schedule. We're all forced to adapt now. I've been doing, for the La Crosse Symphony, for our YouTube channel, I've been doing a series of video introductions to the great works of the symphonic repertoire. And it's something that we're going to always have as an archive. So when we do that Beethoven Fifth Symphony again a few years down the road, we'll have my video introduction to go back to as a resource. As good as an investment as it is, that we all can't wait to get back to the working capital of just sharing, not just presenting, but sharing with our audiences in live performance.
I think the online component kind of extends it to different audiences. It makes it accessible and just kind of opens it up to a whole new world. But of course, there's a transition period. With your experience with the Maverick Festival in New York, this would have been its 105th year if the festival hadn't been canceled. Why do you believe that chamber music festival like that has stood the test of time?
Well, that's a great question. The Maverick Concerts, as it's called, is the oldest summer chamber music festival in America. Chamber music, especially at the Maverick, has survived because it is the ultimate back to basic experience in classical music. You go into a very small, intimate space. It's the polar opposite of going to hear a great symphony orchestra with 1,000 people, as we do in La Crosse. The beauty of chamber music is the purity of the experience, this kind of almost literal one-on-one exchange between the performing artist and the listener. The people who built it in 1916 dubbed it a music chapel, and that is what it is. It's like the chapel in the woods. I think that's the key to the Mavericks' success.
So what's next for you, the La Crosse Symphony Orchestra?
Whether it's the La Crosse Symphony or it's the New York Philharmonic, we're all wondering as to what this upcoming winter season is going to be. I think it's fair to say it's going to be a combination of intimate live performance experiences and then broader outreach experiences via the internet. Once this thing is behind us, I don't predict a rebound so much as a bacchanal. People are going to be so hungry for just live experiences, whether it's going to be hearing music or going to art galleries, bars, museums. So hopefully when we do emerge, we're going to have a more kind of holistic life in which we value not only our great experiences indoors, but also the value of being in the great outdoors.
I really agree with you on that concept. I feel like that people are reaching out and trying to connect. And I think there's going to be a real excitement in the next year, 18 months.
I think so too. I think if we can learn the right lessons from this catastrophe, we will ultimately have a better world.
So where can people find out more about you?
Well, I have a website, alexanderplatt.com. You can, my eyes get sleepy just looking at it. So I'm very blessed with a varied and an interesting life as a musician. I get to have all these different beautiful experiences in different places. I do have to say, not to flatter you, but the La Crosse and this driftless region of the upper Midwest are very, very dear to my heart. Every day I spend in La Crosse is apple pie.
La Crosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at La Crosse Locals. Subscribe to the La Crosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.